Come on, light. Give me a bit of light. Give me a bit of light. There we go. Hello my lovelies, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be going through the books I read in September. In September I managed to read 5 books, which is a heck of a lot better than I did in July and August. They are very short books though. I think all but one of them are books I read for university, and one of these books is actually my first ever audiobook that I've listened to all the way through, and I really enjoyed it. So today I'm going to be going through those books. The first teeny tiny book that I finished in September is one that I read for my dissertation, because I'm doing my dissertation on the atomic bombs in literature, and it is 1000 Paper Cranes, the story of Sadako and the Children's Peace Statue by Takayuki Ishii. This is a straight up account of a real life Sadako Sasaki who had radiation sickness after the bomb dropped, and while she was in hospital she folded 1000 paper cranes, which is meant to be able to give you a wish, but she did unfortunately die of her illness, and there was a national campaign for there to be a Children's Peace Statue brought up in her name. This is very basic in its writing and structure. There are very little embellishments to go along with the true story that's at its core. There are also some pictures to go with it as the companion to the story, but they are very hard to see at times. Although one thing I thought was a really nice touch was at the end it showed you how to fold a paper crane, which is very sweet. It's very easy read in one sitting, and it is a nice little introduction to the harsh reality of radiation sickness. So overall I've given this 3.5 stars because although there isn't much enjoyment in reading this, it's very basic, but it still tells you a good true story, and I'm glad somebody's put Sadako's story into print. The next book is one I could have gone my whole life without ever reading and been so much happier for it, and that is Annie Westschak's Royal Baby Revelation. This is one of the books I'm reading for my Pulp Fictions in Medieval England module, which is very mainly about medieval Middle English romances. But Middle English romances can be considered the pulp fiction of the time, so we've had to look at some pulp fiction of our time, and pulp fiction basically means mass market books, books that aren't necessarily written well, in fact sometimes written really badly, but they are the books that sell, and the books that sell are the Mills and Boons, really tacky romance books, and I've got to read 2 others of these as well. This is a story of a geologist and a prince who somehow get kidnapped and put in the same cave-like cell, because you'd put a geologist and a prince in the same cell if you'd kidnap them, because that makes complete and utter sense. And she's not tied up, but he's tied up by one arm, which gives them enough room to do the do. Just because. And then a year and a half later, she's had the baby, he comes back even though she thinks he's dead, and they have this whole, but I'm a prince and you're a geologist type of thing going on. It's the most stupid and nonsensical plot I've ever read. It doesn't make any sense. The whole thing that sets up the book would not have happened. You do not put a random ass geologist in the same cell as a prince and then only tie the prince up by one arm. Why would they kidnap a geologist in the first place? What's the even, what? The reason why I love reading is the escapism into the world building, and books that I enjoy the most are books like Sarah J. Maas books, where the fantasy world has been so meticulously thought out. I need to be immersed in the world building of a book. I love it when somebody has just thought about the most mundane things and made them magical, made them fit, made them make sense as if it could be real. The logistics of this do not work at all, which is probably why I kind of hated it. I didn't even like it for the smut. The smut in it was just bad. I mean, Sarah J. Maas writes better smut than this, and she writes it so well. So, and I just also couldn't get over the fact that her breasts seem to have more expressions than her face. So I've given this 2 stars. I haven't given it 1 star because at least there was some attempt at trying to put a plot into it, even though it kind of failed. And I'm going to feel so bad now because we've got a week on these Mills and Boons romance books, and one of the authors on one of the books that we're reading is actually going to be coming in to speak to us, and I'm going to end up slating all of these books. The next book I finished was for my Tennyson to Tolkien module about medievalism, and it's a story of the Glimmering Plane by William Wallace, which is meant to be one of the first books that invents the fantasy genre. And I did really want to love it, but I just couldn't get on with this text. It is a story of how Life and his saga go to a world of eternal life in order to find his lost love, and then he finds out this eternal life is a bit meaningless. I did really want to get on with this book because it's got a lot of Icelandic and Norse inspirations to it, but because of how much it was trying to root itself in the saga-like genre without actually being an Icelandic saga, it just felt to me like an imitation of Icelandic sagas instead of being inspired by it, and it got on my nerves slightly in the way it was written, especially since the saga and the adventure that he goes on doesn't seem to have much of a purpose to it, which is hard on a storytelling basis to try and engage with text when you can't see why the story is bothering to happen. I appreciate his attempt to do medieval reminiscent writing style in this, but it just sort of got on my nerves a little bit. I much preferred the flowing writing style of William Morris's News from Noah, which is actually the flip side of this book. They're two very opposite texts, and I will be studying this in this module as well, and I read this in August, and I did like it to start with, so it's just a little bit disappointing that I thought his fantasy side of writing was going to be much more my thing, and it turns out I just couldn't engage with this text at all. I can tell when reading this book that this is packed full of symbolism, but I think it's got so much symbolism in it, so saturated by it, that I just couldn't get past it when I was reading. It made it a bit obstructive. It's probably a great text to study and pull apart, but I don't actually want to reread it to be able to do that. So I've given this 2.5 stars, which is a little disappointing, especially when the News from Noah I didn't think was going to be my thing, and to be fair, it was a bit bland in the middle, but I did really like the beginning of this, whereas this from the start I just could not sink my teeth into it. I think the writing style had a lot to do with that. Now on to the only book that I didn't read for university this month, and that is my first ever audiobook that I listened to on my Audible subscription, and that is Ikigai, the Japanese Secret of a Long and Happy Life. I understand that a lot of people thought there was a bit of a disconnect between the title and the content of the book, but I didn't approach this wanting to know something in depth. I didn't approach this to actually wanting to know the secret to a happy life. I just wanted something very calming and something just a little bit insightful to be listening to among all these other texts that I had to be reading academically. Instead, I really like that this book just presents case studies to you, even though they're not all the author's own research. There's a lot of other studies referenced in it, and then I could make up my mind about the case studies that are being presented to me. I didn't want somebody to actually tell me this is the way to live life. I wanted to be able to make up my own mind, sit and consider what's been given to me, and I think this is why I got on with this book really well and some people didn't. I really liked that I could use this book not as like a textbook for the way to live your life, but as a springboard into my own reflections. I've definitely left it with a changed perspective, and I did write a couple of notes down from it. So I've given this book 4 stars because I really enjoyed listening to it. I really love Naoko Mori's narration. She had such a calming voice and a really calming rhythm to it, and that's the audio version that I listened to. So I did really like this book, and I've given it 4 stars. And the last book I finished in September was for my Tennyson to Talking module, and funnily enough, the first book that we're reading in Tennyson to Talking is Tennyson's Idylls of a King. This is a blank verse retelling of Arthurian legends, and I really enjoyed it. We only had to read the bookmark sections, but I decided that I wanted to read it front and back to get the whole story, because even though the poems in it are episodical and can be read on their own, there is an interlinking narrative throughout, so it makes sense in the order that they are, even though they can be taken as individual poems. It's written in blank verse, so it's poetry that doesn't rhyme, and to be fair, if you let your mind wander while you're reading this, you'll lose the gist of it. But when I sat down and I really got into the poetry mindset, I was really enjoying reading it. The lyrical structure of this book works really well for the mystical sense of Arthurian legend, and there are some poems that I especially loved, like Lancelot and Elaine and Peleus and Etare. The ones that I enjoyed the most are the ones that add back and forth dialogue between characters instead of just description, because I think description is where you most easily lose the plot points of a poem. So the format does require you to focus a little, but I was just really taken away with the off-roading legends. So I really enjoyed this, and I've given this 4 stars. So those were the 5 books that I read in September. A lot of university reading, but in October I've given myself more time to read books myself, probably because in the summer months I did try and read ahead with my module reading, and I'm really enjoying the books I've read so far, and I'm really happy with my reading speed at the moment. So like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.